Hey there everyone, and welcome to DnD Horror Stories with DnD Doge. Today's video is going to be a bit shorter than normal, as I have a very busy week, with dentist appointments and dealing with other things. So I figured that I would present a story that I had recorded over a year ago, but for whatever reason, never put it into a video. So here's a tale about how a hyped up Dungeons & Dragons campaign just never happened due to people having too high of expectations. To the post. My first campaign that never happened, by Reddit user Fobar Imperius. So this was a confusing situation of a game that I was invited to that never ended up happening last week. I'm still incredibly confused and unsure if I want to continue with trying to start into Dungeons & Dragons, given this stress. I have a few friends on Discord who want to help me get started, but this whole experience was the most stressful I have dealt with involving a tabletop game. Now, I play a lot of expensive board games with friends, and own numerous ones with co-op, PvE, and PvP. Two of my favorites being Arkham Horror and Scythe. And I'll usually play solo games to fully understand the rules while going over the manuals. I've actually briefly posted about Arkham Horror before, and read through the numerous manuals to get an understanding of what I was looking at, so I could easily play with some friends. I've been incredibly interested in Dungeons & Dragons for a long time, because, to me, it's almost like a board game that we, as a group, get to build, but felt daunted when getting into the hobby. I've seen the absolutely numerous number of materials for it on bookstore shelves, and it's like looking at a television show with decades of history that you know nothing about. As such, I've been looking for an excuse to join into the game for quite some time. That opportunity came, and it was a train wreck. Seems like a polite way of putting it. So here's how it started. None of the names I use are the real names of anyone involved. I get to talking with a coworker of mine who plays Dungeons & Dragons, whom I'll call Josh, on a Wednesday, and who had discussed with 3 other coworkers about the idea of playing a game or two with him. The problem is, he's experienced, but doesn't want a DM, and they don't have anyone else who is good at it, nor do they want a DM either. Now, Josh and I know each other as work acquaintances. I wouldn't call us strangers, but friends is probably too strong of a term. Still, he seems to think I have the skills of an effective DM. I was kind of flattered and caught off guard, and I get pulled into this conversation about possibly being a DM for the group. I agree without really thinking about it, although I make it clear that I'll need to buy the books and look around at pricing, and then almost immediately realize that I haven't the slightest clue as to what I'm doing. I really try to explain this to Josh, but there's one thing I should make clear early on. I want to believe Josh is a nice guy at heart, but he has some social problem where he constantly has to be talking during the conversation. I can usually get a word in or two, but when he gets stressed or excited, he'll talk into your sentence and overtake the conversation. You can't speak over him at this point without getting upset, at which point he sometimes goes silent after realizing that you're angry. And trying to talk at the same time to make your point is unhelpful. He doesn't hear it anyways. This became a major problem. I've never noticed before, because usually I'm fine just adding into the conversation and listening to the other stories. But it became apparent how little he was listening during this fiasco. Thus, I decided to go to Barnes & Noble and check on the books to get started. This was probably something I should have asked him beforehand, because this is when I realized that the books alone are fairly expensive. I'm seeing starter guides, guides for specific expansions, a guide for almost $50 for Dungeon Masters, a different Dungeon Masters guide that's $35. I try flipping through the pages, but I might as well be reading an alien language, because I'm not experienced enough to tell the difference, and only one of these books isn't shrink-wrapped. I knew these books existed, but I never really knew how expensive this hobby gets. I'm looking at the full cost of a new board game with all the expansions, just for the manuals of D&D. Are there miniature figures I need? Do I have to draw a map, or do these books come with them? Do they have sample campaigns that I can use? I'm completely lost, so I decided to do a quick search online for the books and find a similar massive number of books that I don't know the difference. I decided to wait until the next day to talk to Josh, as I don't have his number. It seems like the guy who has played would be able to help me buy the right stuff. Plus, I figure this game is probably over a month away. I did manage to tell Josh that I don't know what I'm doing and I don't have any books, so surely he cannot expect to be playing tomorrow or anything. Defeated but hopeful, I head home empty-handed. The next day, Thursday, I go talk to Josh, and before I can even ask him where I should start, he calls over the other 3 players, who I will call Larry, Paul, and Stephanie, who are already discussing the version that they're going to work with, and basically ask me for my email to shoot me their character sheets for review. Review? I just kind of confusedly ask, when exactly are we planning to do this? And get a reply from Larry that Josh had planned on possibly next week. Possibly next week? I have to reiterate to Josh that I am a newbie at this, and I will be needing help to understand if their characters are usable or acceptable. I try to remind him that I don't have any guides to understand this or know if this will work, and he basically completely ignores me as I tell the players to send their characters to Josh, and that I need help in getting started. This is when I find out that Josh has not informed them that I don't have any materials to play. I don't have any manuals. I haven't read any information yet, and I don't know how to dungeon master yet either. He basically keeps assuring them that he'll help me, but the problem is, he doesn't. Larry, Stephanie, and Paul can tell this is going to be a problem, but we all have to get back to work. I don't see him pretty much for the rest of the day after he gets called back to do some stuff for unloading, and I miss my chance to talk with him again or get his contact info, which I forgot to do earlier because he basically took over the conversation. I look online for some help and find some guides that help you understand which books you need and why. Basically, I was told that I'd need a DM guide, the starter guide for D&D to understand the game, and a monster compendium to even set up a campaign with threats. And even then, most places did not recommend a newbie starting as a DM unless you have a solid grasp on tabletop RPG mechanics. That meant I could be in way over my head and spend almost a good $100, and I just don't have that kind of cash for that right now. It seems the 3 players were ready to go, and here I am basically holding up the group. The following day, Friday, I talk to Paul and tell him that I have not only never done any of this before, but if they're so ready to go, then they probably should go on with another person. Paul doesn't take this too well and gets somewhat upset, stating that Josh told him that I was ecstatic and I agreed to do this. As far as he was concerned, I was ducking a game that they had become highly interested in and was basically ruining their fun. I get angry back and snap that none of them ever came to talk to me about it at all. I remind him it's just been 2 days since this even got brought up, and now there's possibly a session in just a week without any approval from me or my schedule. Josh approached me, asked me if I wanted to DM, and I said yes, but I had never done so and didn't have any of the books, and he said that he'd help me out, but he's given me zero help. Paul then asks if I, at the very least, talk to Josh about the characters, and I tell him that I haven't seen Josh since yesterday, and I don't have any contact info. He then gets mad at me for not at least having Josh's number, and basically says, "Forget it," and storms off to work. I see him throughout the day, but he's pissy and won't talk to me. Day 4, Saturday, and I still don't have any books. I decide to drive up to work, as I have the day off, and see if Josh is working, and I instead see Stephanie and Larry. The 2 of them approach me and begin immediately hurling accusations that I told Paul that I wasn't doing anything for the game and had basically given up. Fairly pissed that nobody was listening to me, I demand to know if Josh is working today, and when they confirm, I storm off to confront him. When I find him, he's his usual chipper self, and I demand to know why he hasn't given me any help in setting this up. He then just responds by telling me not to worry, and that he looked over the character sheets for Paul, Larry, and Stephanie, and says that they're good. But I interrupt him this time by speaking over him fairly angrily, and point out that every time I try to explain myself or ask questions, he keeps interrupting me. He continues trying to interrupt me, and I have to continuously talk over him to explain my position, finally telling him that I'm not doing this. I have no books, I have no idea what's going on, and I have 3 jerks yelling at me because he oversold them on my skill, and they expected way too much out of a newbie. All I agreed to was to try and DM, but that I have no experience and needed time, and he basically booked a game within a week. He then keeps trying to reassure me that everything is fine, and tells me to just relax and he'll help me on Monday. Monday? Monday as in this week coming Monday? He has literally scheduled a meetup the day after tomorrow. I tell him that I have numerous errands and a doctor's appointment, and demand to know why he's doing all of this without contacting me. I then remember to remind him that he never gave me his number, so he's been setting all of this up without any input from me, the person who was supposed to be running this campaign in the first place. What possible story could they play on Monday when all I have prepared is exasperated sighs and a complete lack of materials? At this point, I tell him he's on his own. The entire situation has been horrifically stressful, and I don't even know where to begin getting the materials to even start playing at a reasonable price. He then tries to reassure me that it's only $100, as if I can just spend money like he knows my finances. Done with the conversation, I storm off, and I don't see any of them on Sunday. So, Monday hits. I obviously don't get contacted by anyone, despite Josh now having my number from Saturday. The day comes and goes, as I lament this cool D&D game that I could have been a part in. My mind drifts between these cool moments of seeing the players face down cool bosses and enjoy a fun story, and the experience of having 4 players basically bite into me without a single bit of assistance in how to get started. I just decide to run Arkham Horror by myself because, at the very least, I have that game. Sure, it's a board game and not a tabletop RPG, but at least I can play this one with friends or by myself without getting my head bitten off or ignored. Ended up winning against Cthulhu, so net gain in the end, I suppose. Tuesday comes, and none of them are talking to me. I basically ignore it. I'm a grown adult, so if they want to cold shoulder me like high schoolers, which none of us are, in fact, I'm the youngest of the group, and high school was still almost a decade ago, then fine. None of them wanted to help me anyways. Josh set all of this up and kept making decisions, but did nothing to help me prepare or give me some materials to use temporarily. Paul basically made it all my fault, as if Josh hadn't oversold the game, and accused me of ruining the game that I didn't even know was happening in just a couple of days. Larry and Stephanie were no better, getting upset as if I was deliberately slacking off. Clearly, this is not a good group, and I shouldn't bother. Just when I think this is the end of the story, Josh catches up to me and offers me to borrow his DM guide, which he brought with him to work. I try to politely refuse. What I want to say is, Josh, I really appreciate that you think I'm good enough to DM on my first try, but after looking at some stuff online, it seems like this isn't a good idea. Thank you, but I'm gonna have to stay away from D&D for the time being. I want to say that, but as usual, he keeps talking over me and refuses to let me speak as he continues on about a game in a week, and new characters, and my potential story ideas for a DM session, and so on. Eventually, I just walk off without a word, leaving him bewildered and confused. It's Wednesday, and now even Josh isn't speaking to me. I talk to a close work friend of mine who also speaks with Josh, and apparently, Josh told the other members of the group that I, quote, offered Fobar Imperius the DM manual. But then, as I was talking, I turned around and when I looked back, I was by myself. Fobar Imperius had just walked off without explanation. I could go and argue, but I already knew Josh wouldn't listen. So I just decided to do the sensible thing and not bother saying anything. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, I'm getting the cold shoulder from Josh now too. That was how my first and only DM session went. It never happened, and yet I managed to apparently piss all of the players off. Well, I can only imagine how frustrating that whole ordeal was. First, basically being told that you're going to DM, then trying to figure out the game, but not having the money to buy all the books that you need. Then, having the coworker that set you up to be the DM basically ignore all of your attempts at communicating that you aren't quite ready to DM a D&D game just yet, only to then proceed to hype up the other coworkers for a game that you never had any intent on being ready by the time Josh promised them. Then, for them all to give OP the cold shoulder for not being able to run the game was just childish. If anything, that just tells me that this group would have probably been a nightmare to run a game for, and it was probably for the best that OP didn't, as that would have made their first D&D experience into a stress-fueled train wreck. Hopefully, OP has since been able to play in a game with people that actually know how to communicate. But that is all I have to say about that. And again, sorry for the shorter video. But don't you think for a second that I will leave you without your dose of kitties before I go. So, here is a Luna close-up. There you go. Can't have a video without any kitties now, can we? But that is all I have for you today. As always, I appreciate all of you, and hope that your games remain horror story free. Until next time.